going to be sharing insights on navigating the barriers, particularly within the imposter syndrome. And that is something that really gets in the way of many women and other professionals who want to advance in the space of business and entrepreneurship. So we really look forward to learning from your insights, Kath, and how to navigate those challenges while leading in this industry. Thank you so much, and over to you.
So, Bungibe, thank you for that introduction. Paula, thank you for inviting me. And a quick shout out to Juanita Williams, one of the Quote This Woman Plus board members who's here in the audience today, as well as to all of the other journalists and experts that we know that are here today. Lovely to see you all. So I'm going to be talking about imposter syndrome. And in fact, I've just made the first mistake of my presentation, which has given me that awful imposter feeling. So we try and not call it imposter syndrome, we try and call it imposter phenomenon, because when we call it a syndrome, we make it out to be something that you need to work really hard to address. And if we can see it rather as a phenomenon or as thinking, it becomes less medicalized and it becomes easier to deal with. And I just wanted to start by saying that talking about imposter syndrome is really important to me. And it's something that I love doing because more than anything else in the world, I believe that every woman, every girl child, no matter who they are or where they live, deserves their voice, and that no voice should ever be left behind. This is what gets me up in the morning. This is what has me at my desk late at night and on weekends. It's something that is really, really important to me. Because firstly, as a mother of two amazing young women, as a sister of four really wholehearted, glorious women who are doing amazing things in the world, and as someone who's just surrounded by so many young children, girl children, young women interns who just bring so much joy to my life, I feel that I and every single other woman really needs to look at how they show up, not only for the sake of ourselves, but also for the sake of our daughters and our daughters' daughters. You know, we can really determine what the world can be like for our children if we look at our own internal voices. So I just want to talk a little bit about imposter phenomenon, what it is, and what you can expect us to talk about today. She said as her mouse stopped working. Let's try that again. There we go. So first thing I want to ask you is to please expect to write things down. So if you could have pen and paper handy, I think it would be useful. And also expect to possibly think about things that might be unfamiliar, possibly even uncomfortable, or to think about familiar things in a rather different way. So please give yourselves space to breathe, to be gentle with yourself if that happens. I also want to ask you to expect interaction and informality. Please, at any stage, ask questions, make comments, argue with what I'm saying. Please use the chat. And if I get so involved in my chat that in my talk that I don't look at the chat, please just can I ask somebody to just let me know and ask me to respond to questions. But at any stage, please just ask questions. So let's start about looking at what imposter thinking is. I think it's something that is familiar to almost all of us. Imposter thinking is that feeling that you don't belong, but more importantly, you're feeling imposter phenomenon when you feel like you're just about to be outed as a fraud. There are stats that say that up to 70% of high achievers experience imposter phenomenon. And it's really just a thought set that we can look at and that we can change. It's fueled by our own inner critics, by our families, by our cultures, religions, and even how we're educated, especially as women. Even Maya Angelou, who is someone I admire so much, wrote regularly about having imposter thoughts. She said every time she was about to publish a book, she was sure that no one would buy it and that people would say that she was an absolute fraud. The thing with imposter phenomenon is that sometimes it's a feeling that you're the problem. And this is the family legacy concept that we've been brought up, so many of us, that we either on the one hand, that we're just not good enough, or, and this is really common with the younger generations, we've been brought up to believe that, that we're so perfect and with these unrealistic expectations that we'll never fail. It's often associated with anxiety, with burnout, and with feelings of deep shame. And if you believe that you're the problem with your imposter thinking, then tools like the Client's Imposter Phenomenon Scale can really help you get to grips with this. And you can see there's a QR code here, but we can also post links to this later on in the chat. But not everybody feels as if they're the problem. Sometimes it's not that it's about us, but it's more about the system. We don't feel like we're about to be outed, but we feel deeply excluded by this men's club that we try and access in our work, and by deeply entrenched biases. And if we can see it as a system, barriers that exclude and other us, it takes the burden off us of having to try and fix ourselves, and can highlight the need to change workplace culture and, in fact, society in itself. So those are two different ways of looking at it. Sometimes it really does feel like we're the frauds about to be outed, but sometimes it just feels like there is a system that we're never good enough for. So I want you to just take a moment to write down a note for yourself, or just think for yourself how you think about it. Do you, when you have feelings of being an imposter, do you think it's legacy thinking that you've inherited from the expectations that you got as a child within your family? Do you have thoughts like, stop making a fool of yourself, don't ask for help, always be perfect? Or do you think it's more structural, that it's bias that comes from society, from social media, from culture, from the workplace? Things like women must always be endlessly kind and can never say anything nasty or stand up for themselves. Or even only difficult women are the women who open their mouths and speak up. So take a moment and think about which resonates more with you, because it does help to have this kind of understanding. Feel free to just make a note for yourself, or else to write it in the chat if it's something you feel you'd like to do. So before I go actually into how I believe we can address imposter phenomenon, I'd like to just think about the psychology behind, and I'm not a psychologist, though I have done a Jungian course and can get quite caught up in Jungian thinking. But just what is the psychology behind the entrenched thought patterns that make us feel like we're either not good enough or that we're frauds? So the first thing I just want to focus on is confirmation bias, which I think many is a term quite a few people may well have heard of. And this is just the idea that when we believe something, we'll always look for and notice the things we've chosen to believe, and we'll reject and ignore anything that could be different from that. And confirmation bias is incredibly strong in negative situations. So when we have negative thoughts, we look for and notice everything that confirms those negative thoughts. And if that means that we've never learned to believe praise or to believe in ourselves, we actually sometimes need something quite mind shifting to get us to change. The other psychological concept I want to raise quickly is just internal family systems, which is an idea from psychology that sees the mind as a team of parts that are trying to protect us. So we've got this calm, passionate self, but we've also got some fairly wayward players on our team. And overcoming imposter thinking can mean recognizing the different parts, but making sure that the person in the driving seat is that calm, rational self rather than the wonky ones. So the usual cast of parts that we can look at in terms of imposter thinking, besides the self who you really want to be the leader, is the perfectionist, and some of us will be able to relate to this. So the idea is we're not safe unless our output is flawless. Then there's the pleaser, stay likable, don't rock the boat. The achiever, like unless I have output, I am not worthy. Keep going at all costs 24/7. The inner critic, so you did that all right, you were just lucky. The procrastinator, who always wants to find a quick escape anytime we feel ashamed within ourselves. And then there's the numb part that just shuts down feelings, the not enough part that always holds on to old pains of being dismissed. The visibility wound parts, like the last time I stood up, it really hurt me, either because of racism or sexism or something else. And then finally, that culture guardian, like I have to represent my whole community and I have to do it so well. So if you can bear in mind which of those parts really resonated with you, I'm going to move on and look at 9 great tools that I personally believe, and at Quote This Woman, we like to talk about for overcoming imposter phenomenon. The first of these, and it sounds trite, but it's not, is just find your spark, find your joy. So if you think about when I started speaking today, I spoke about why I love doing talks like this. I spoke about women's voices and the things that make me want to get up in the morning. If you can speak, do your pitches, engage from the one determined thing that puts a fire in your belly, then you really can bring your audience with you. So think about what ignites you the way I get my from thinking about how our voices today shape the world that our children inherit tomorrow. When you talk from that place of fierce urgency inside you, people who you think are outsiders, who you think are judging, they become insiders. You'll feel them rooting for you, and imposter feelings will go away. The second tool that I want to look at is loving your listeners. Paula, when you were speaking earlier, I think you said something that made me think how so often the elephant in the room is our audiences, and we just don't spend enough time making sure that we really know them and understand them. And imposter feeling occurs in two-way settings. We can't feel inferior unless in our own minds we've given someone else a superior position. And this is just a story we tell ourselves from our thinking. Often it has absolutely nothing to do with our external reality. It's just confirmation bias. And I know this from personal experience. So recently I did a training of science communicators that was funded by the Gates Foundation. So it was well paid. And because it was well paid, I immediately felt like I was not good enough to give this talk. And there was one woman who seemed to be the leader of the pack of the scientists. She was immaculately dressed. She arrived late and she just had a look on her face constantly that made me think that she doubted everything I was saying. She had this way of pulling back in her chair when I spoke that made me think that she was like dismissing what I was saying. And in the first tea break, she came up to me and she said, I really like what you've been saying in her fancy accent. And it made me think in my mind, she's just being fake. She's just being false. She really hasn't liked the thing I'm saying. And I was like wondering why she was speaking to me in such a fake way. And then she actually did this. She put a hand on her chest and she leaned back and she said, you make me think about things in a whole new way. And I realized that I totally misinterpreted her body language. Me thinking that she was judging me was her thinking, whoa, this is a whole new way of framing things. And it made me feel very, very humble. So loving your listeners means acknowledging that our thinking about our external environment is invariably flawed. We don't know what other people, what our audiences are thinking about us, and we so easily attribute negative things to them through confirmation bias. So if you can walk in the shoes of your audience and feel their vulnerabilities, their oh so human flaws, you can change how you engage. My third piece of advice is just dump those persistent critics. There's some critics that you actually can't win over, and you know it's not you, it's them. So this could be a parent, haha, I know that one. It could be someone you work with, or a critical voice deep inside you that is often lodged somewhere quite hurtful in the past, but really just wants to protect you. So to diminish the power of your internal critic or external critic who always seems to be judging you, the first thing you can do is just claim what they're doing. Say, you never root for my side. Okay, I mean, claim this as an internal message. You might not need to say that to them. And then give it back to them. Again, say in your mind, I can see that that's your stuff, not mine. And this takes you from emotions-based reacting to rational strength. Number 4, work to be seen. So in case of imposter thinking, it really makes sense to just put yourself into those uncomfortable places, because the more you do that, the more familiar it will be and the better you will become at doing it. So create those neural grooves that make you comfortable on stage, in the spotlight, doing uncomfortable stuff. And the thing is, before you do that, practice till you know everything backwards. So trust us. The more you practice, the more confident you will get. This really, for all of you potential PR people out there, this really is the basis of any kind of media training, presentation skills training. Just make sure people practice, because practice creates confidence. And the big idea is to turn confidence and visibility into old familiar friends, rather than that feeling of imposter being your old familiar friend. And then just keep a running list of achievements. Acknowledge your wins so that every time doubt creeps in, you can check back and just see how far you've actually come. And this is really great if you've got that internal perfectionist voice telling you that what you're doing isn't going to ever be good enough. Our 6th recommendation: use imagination to just create and live your best future self. So think, who's the ideal person you'd love to be 6 months from now or a year from now? Just act like that person right now. Sometimes it's really about faking it till you make it. So, from neuroscience, we know that imagination is much more powerful than logic, and you can recode your self-doubt just by focusing on the future self that you want. And the more time you spend in positive imagining, the better your mind will support you. Number 7, see if you can turn your mess into the message that you use. It's easier to view the times we stumble as liabilities, but if you can rather imagine seeing them as great raw material that you can share in the right circumstances to build authentic connection, you'll really see the difference. And this also links back to what Paula said about using networks. And we can only use networks and create networks if we're prepared to be authentic in them and we're prepared to show our vulnerable selves. And if you find yourself clinging to the same negative stories all the time, try talking about that mess and seeing how the positive affirmation you'll get from the connections and from the people that you talk with. And then thank your past, because every misstep you've made has taught you something. If you can sink those lessons into your present self and into this future self that you're creating and view them gratefully, you'll be able to use your imagination again to make good things familiar and to make them real. And this is just the greatest exercise for cultivating hope for the future. And then lastly, don't ever underestimate your knowledge. What feels like second nature to you would other people would see as a rare gift, a skill that they would love to have. And so often we don't know this. We don't know what we do comfortably that other people view and think, gee, I wish I could be like that. And this is really important, especially if you find that in your workplace you often run into slights and microaggressions. So just stopping for a moment, I'd like to ask you to just write down any tools that resonated with you and think if you could practice them, if you could make a commitment to yourself about them. Okay. So I spoke earlier about internal family systems thinking to overcome imposter feelings. A quick little five-step tool that you can use when you do feel like an imposter is to just name the part of you that is doing sending a negative message in your mind and say, I can see that my perfectionist is playing up here. And then just like acknowledge that part, say, hey, thanks for being there. And just think what would happen if it could just ease up. So say to that part, like, what are you worried about, Miss Perfectionist inside me? What are you worried will happen if you take a break, if you don't work so hard? And then just say, you know what, you move into the shotgun position, and my good self is going to drive the car from here. And there's a lovely just little pocket script of saying, I see you and thank you. And I'm wondering what you're worried about. Whatever you're worried about, I'm going to take the front step or the driving place for the next few minutes, and you ride shotgun. One of the best things that I found in my life for overcoming imposter thinking is having circles of solidarity, which I suppose you can just say like people to lean on. Sometimes it's been actual groups that I've belonged to where I've worked with people very openly about fears that I've had. Sometimes it's been things that have just developed spontaneously over time. So every Monday at 8 o'clock for 30 minutes, I have a call with someone in the media, another woman working for a media nonprofit, and the two of us just vomit out our vulnerabilities to each other and reassure each other that we're doing okay. Circles like this can make all of the difference. Just to have some kind of no judgment place where you can just share what's worrying you, swap tools, celebrate each other's wins, whether it's a regular coffee, a regular phone call, or an online meeting. These are also great places where we can hold each other accountable for our growth and for moving into our better future selves. Again, I'd like to just encourage you to think about what kind of support structure you do already use, because I think almost all of us have these, but perhaps we're not conscious of them and perhaps we're not using them as consciously as we could. For some people, it might be seeing a mentor or a coach. For some, it might just be a really sympathetic doctor or medical practitioner that they can talk to. For others, it's a colleague who they have a regular check-in with. Sometimes it's someone who you actually don't check in with that regularly, but when things are bad, you know, has always got your back and always believes that you're better than you are or than you think you are within yourself. So take a moment, write this down for yourself and see if you can find something that you can build on and use better in terms of a circle of solidarity for yourself. Honestly, I can't emphasize enough the power of authentically showing up as you network in order to not only help yourself, but to find out that everybody else is the same mess that you are, and to find ways to use those circles to help each other too. So I've put a link here to an exercise that a woman called Byron Katie has developed for taking the thoughts that are the most common in our minds when we feel like imposters and changing them around. So really questioning our self-limiting beliefs. And I just want to make the point that when we turn our core doubts on their heads, we've got the power to choose a more supportive story. And I like to think of this as a meta practice of the mind that really rewires the way that we respond to fear. Again, I'll happily share these links in the chat afterwards again. Sorry, wrong way. And then the final thoughts I want to make is just to remind us that every time we feel like imposters, we need to take it as a reminder for ourselves to get out of our busy, active, judgmental, self-judging brains and just slow down, to pay attention to our bodies, to pay attention to our thoughts, our emotions, and also to our surroundings, and be curious about the deeper patterns that show up in our lives and to choose new patterns that can make our lives meaningful. And I think on this point, I recently worked out that the word curiosity is based on the word cure. And I think for imposter thinking, the cure often is just about slowing down and being more curious about our internal thinking, where it's coming from, and how we can change it.